At 7:55 a.m. on the 58th floor helipad of Voss Aerial Corp, executives gathered for a critical survey. CEO Alara Voss, known for her arrogance, openly mocked Daniel Ross, the janitor and single father, snapping, "Janitor, try flying it. We'd love to see what you can do besides holding a mop." Unbeknownst to her, Daniel's daughter Lily was watching. Moments later, the flagship helicopter suffered a terrifying major fault, system won't initialize. As panic erupted among the best engineers, a quiet, authoritative voice cut through the chaos. "I know how to fix that failure." Everyone turned to Daniel. Daniel's schedule was a constant balancing act, built around his 7-year-old daughter's strict biological clock. He clocked in at Voss Aerial Corp at 4:30 a.m., navigating the silent, majestic structure before the sleek executive cars arrived in the garage. His work hours revolved entirely around Lily, ensuring he finished cleaning the technical compartments in time for school pickup. His daily work was tedious but essential, checking water pressure tanks, meticulously wiping hydraulic fluid leaks in the hangar bay, preventing slips that could cause millions in damage. No one in the high-stakes world of Voss Aerial knew about his extraordinary past. He was simply Daniel, the janitor. Daniel maintained a calm, compliant demeanor, a conscious choice to absorb the constant, low-level condescension from the managerial staff. To them, the cleaning crew was an invisible, disposable resource, a necessary evil at the very bottom of the organizational chart. Janitor equals uneducated equals low ambition. It was a fixed, rigid equation in the company hierarchy, one Daniel accepted for the sake of his privacy. His life, since his wife's passing 3 years ago, had been reduced to simple protective routines. Early mornings at work, evenings dedicated to making Lily laugh, and late nights fixing neighbors' broken appliances for extra cash. Lily was the only sun in his sky, the gravitational center of his existence. She was the reason he traded a dangerous, high-pressure career, a life on the razor's edge of risk, for the simple, blessed safety of the mop and bucket. He had exchanged power and fame for quiet predictability. The mockery was almost daily, a persistent hum of disrespect. Sometimes it was carelessness, like the contemptuous raised eyebrow and wave-off from Director James. Other times it was deliberately cruel. Daniel never retaliated, recalling his personal mantra, a silent prayer of focus. "My peace starts with Lily. I don't need the fight. I don't need recognition." His focus was always inward, on the calmness he had fought so hard to create for his daughter, a fortress against the chaos of his former life. Alara Voss, the youngest and most successful CEO in the company's history, was renowned for her ruthless brilliance, but also notorious for her crushing arrogance. She commanded respect through fear and icy coldness, rarely making eye contact with anyone below director level, viewing lower-level employees as mere tools to execute her grand vision. That morning, the tension of the impending crucial flight, a multi-million-dollar contract hinged entirely on a perfect presentation, compounded her fatigue. Her exhaustion often sharpened into cruelty, which she had vented on Daniel in passing, looking for an easy target to relieve her own high-stakes anxiety. The ridicule on the helipad was particularly brutal because it was public, personal, and questioned his worth. Daniel felt the familiar sting, a flash of pain, but his only instinct was to shield Lily, who was watching from the observation room window. He quickly bowed his head, pretending to focus on an oil spot, wishing the moment would pass, praying Lily didn't understand the cruelty. He desperately wanted her to see him as strong, not as the recipient of their contempt. The secret he carried was heavy, a burden of competence he dared not reveal. Daniel Ross was not just a janitor. He was Commander Ross, a strategic technical pilot in the Navy, specializing in search and rescue (SAR). He wasn't just trained to fly. He was trained to fix, troubleshoot, and execute impossible emergency landings under hostile conditions. He only left the service when his wife's terminal illness demanded his full, immediate attention, and he had promised himself that Lily would never again face the terror of him being deployed to a combat zone. He wanted silence, safety, and predictability. Voss Aerial Corp offered all three, provided he remained completely invisible. As Alara's team began boarding procedures, the chief pilot's voice crackled over the radio. taut with alarm. "We have a system block. Emergency shutdown procedure initiated. The flight is unflyable." Ilara's face, minutes ago flushed with cruel laughter, now went bone white. She tried to maintain her cold facade, but Daniel, observing from his humble position, could see the pure, unadulterated panic in her eyes. The contract, the year's profits, her carefully built reputation, all hung by a technical thread. Yet even in her terror, she still didn't truly see him. Lily, her small face still pressed against the thick glass, her brow furrowed in confusion, asked her father softly, "Dad, why was that lady laughing at you like that?" Daniel stroked his daughter's hair, his hands shaking slightly, feeling a sharper, deeper pain than any insult. He knew he had to protect her, even if it meant remaining the janitor who didn't belong. But a small, dangerous thought stirred in his mind. If I stay invisible, the disaster she fears will still happen. The helipad was a scene of escalating, nerve-shredding chaos. 9:15 a.m. There were only 45 minutes left before the investors arrived for the critical flight. The flagship helicopter, a multi-million-dollar asset and a symbol of Voss Aerial's precision engineering, had become a beautifully crafted, useless hulk of machinery. The engineering director, Thomas, a usually meticulous man, was visibly shaking, shouting into his headset, "Abort! Full shutdown! Check the main power bus! We need a diagnosis now!" Another engineer, pale and frantic, argued back, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's not power, Thomas. We checked the main bus twice. It has to be the rotor chamber pressure control valve stuck in a bypass loop. We're locked out." Whispers spread like wildfire among the support staff, escalating the tension. 60 investors are waiting. If we scrub this survey, the stock tanks, and the deal is off. The cost wasn't just money, it was the company's future. Ilara stood rigid, her posture the only thing preventing her from collapsing. She mentally drafted the scathing press release that would announce the cancellation, a professional and personal failure. The system cannot fail. "Not on the most crucial flight of the year," she repeated, her voice a shaky, self-denying whisper. The crew was now openly arguing, paralyzed by fear. No one dared touch the manual overrides for fear of causing a catastrophic mechanical failure. The system was too complex, the stakes too high. Engineers threw out desperate, unproven theories. Maybe a circuit surge from the ground power unit? No, perhaps it's a software lock from the new autopilot patch. We need a clean reboot. A clean reboot could erase the pre-flight simulation data. We can't risk it. The room was filling with technical noise and useless suggestions, a desperate mess of fear masking incompetence. It was then that Daniel, gently pushing his cleaning cart past the technical access doors, paused. He could feel the panic radiating from them. He looked over the shoulders of the arguing engineers at the debug console, which displayed a rapid sequence of tiered error codes. The diagnostic screen flashed a deep, alarming red, a sequence he instantly recognized. "Janitor! Get out of here! This is a restricted critical area!" James, the senior director, who had mocked him minutes before, snapped, his fear making him aggressive. Daniel intended to comply, to retreat to the safety of his anonymity, but the screen held his gaze. He saw the pattern, the signature of the failure, immediately. He stepped forward, setting the mop down. "That failure," he said, his voice calm, clear, and utterly authoritative amidst the storm, "is called a pressure stabilization loop failure in a Type B rotorcraft. I've fixed it before, more than once." The engineers froze. The chief pilot stared. Ilara let out a short, incredulous laugh that was immediately cut short by the gravity in the room. "You? Fix a helicopter technical failure? That's utterly preposterous. We have the best engineers in the world here." Daniel ignored her, his focus purely technical, his eyes locked on the rapidly scrolling error log. He pointed a gloved finger at a specific sequence in the blinking error code. "You attempted to initiate the auxiliary engine while the rotor chamber pressure was critically unstable. The system is designed to initiate a hard, unyielding lock. It's a self-preservation protocol to protect the engine core from catastrophic ignition failure. The lead engineer, Thomas, the director, gasped, his eyes widening as he reread the log. Wait, he's right. The sensor spike. Why didn't I cross-reference the pressure readings? Daniel continued, his voice low and instructive. The voice of a man who dealt with life-or-death scenarios daily, every word weighed with precise accuracy. The solution is manual. You need to release the pressure mechanism lock via the auxiliary port. Pull auxiliary switch level 2, not the main switch. Then you must wait exactly 12 seconds for the internal stabilization buffer to equalize before you restart the sequence. A younger, terrified engineer immediately followed Daniel's instructions, his hands shaking as he reached for the small guarded switch. A sharp mechanical click echoed through the hangar. The warning lights stabilized, then flashed green across the entire debug panel. The high-tension room fell into an unprecedented, eerie silence. Thomas, the director, turned, his eyes wide with a combination of shock and desperate gratitude. Sir, where did you learn that protocol? It's not in any of our commercial manuals? Daniel offered a one-word reply, simple and devastating. Navy. Alara's fragile composure shattered. The condescending smile vanished completely, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated horror as she finally connected the dots. The chief pilot, a veteran with decades of experience in the air, walked up to Daniel, his face a mask of shock and recognition. His voice was a reverent whisper that carried clearly across the silent helipad. Wait a minute, are you Ross? Commander Ross? The one who executed the impossible high-altitude landing of the disabled rotorcraft in the 18 Hurricane? The humble janitor they had casually insulted moments before was, in reality, the living legend, the most decorated technical specialist of the Search and Rescue Flight Corps. Alara froze, her pristine white suit sharply contrasting with her face, flushed with shame. The whispers among the staff intensified, shifting from panic to astonishment, then reverence. Commander Ross? The one who saved 14 men during a cyclone when everyone else retreated? He's been mopping our floors for peanuts? The irony was suffocating. Daniel, his face betraying nothing, tried to deflect the attention, stepping back toward his cart. I'm not military anymore, please, he said calmly, though his words were powerless against the surge of truth sweeping the room. His identity, a top technical pilot who had executed 68 high-risk rescue missions, was now exposed. Every engineer in the room recognized the name. All of them, in some way, had studied the procedures he wrote. Alara felt a paralyzing wave of shame, followed by a terrifying realization of her own smallness. She recalled her cruel joke. We'd love to see what you can do besides holding a mop. She physically recoiled, unable to meet his eyes, feeling like a foolish child who had insulted a general. The image of Daniel, the man she had deemed a disposable cog, was shattered. Thomas, the engineering director, recovered first, his face alight with gratitude. Commander Ross, thank you. Thank you. Without you, this flight would have been scrubbed. The financial damage would have been huge, but the reputational damage, worse. Another engineer, practically a rookie, approached Daniel with reverence. Sir, my emergency training manual. I have a dog-eared copy. I learned directly from your published protocols on asymmetric thrust balancing. Daniel offered a gentle smile, accepting the compliment with quiet dignity. Call me Daniel. I just want a simple life with my daughter now, that's all. The test flight. The stabilized system, now green, reported one final minor pressure anomaly that needed to be checked under flight conditions. The chief pilot stated, "We need a quick, active hover check. Who is cleared to manage the controls for this?" The engineers, still stunned by the revelation, shuffled their feet. No one wanted to take responsibility for the launch after the initial malfunction. The risk was still present. The air grew thick with anxiety again. James, the senior director, tried to force a nervous, half-joke to regain control. Well, maybe the janitor wants to fly it now. He seems to know more than all of us combined. The silence that followed was instant and absolute, a clear sign the joke was no longer funny. James withered under the combined stares of his colleagues. Daniel, recognizing the prolonged crisis and the imminent arrival of the investors, stepped forward without a word. He walked past the chief pilot and headed toward the cockpit door. The moment his hand touched the controls, his posture shifted instantly. The tired janitor disappeared, replaced by the commander. Confident, authoritative, and utterly in command. The entire helipad held its breath, watching a master prepare to perform. "It is stable," Daniel announced, his voice now ringing with quiet power. "I'm going to do a minimal hover check hot. We won't lift off the pad, just cycle the full system to clear the anomaly." He began the sequence. His movements on the complex instrument panel were fluid, economical, and flawless. Not the movements of a manual checker, but of a man who wrote the manual. The chopper spun its massive blades, the aircraft humming back to life, every parameter balanced and responding perfectly. The chief pilot finally broke the tension, his voice a mix of awe and professional respect. "My God, your skills are as legendary as they say." That was mechanical poetry. Ilara watched, mesmerized. Her gaze was no longer arrogant or critical, but a complex mix of respect, confusion, and deep, unexpected admiration. She realized she had been looking at an extraordinary man through the wrong end of the lens, reducing a true hero to a simple cleaning label. The scale of her mistake was enormous, the apology and the daughter. As Daniel exited the cockpit, Lily, who had slipped out of the observation area and witnessed the entire hover check, ran to him, stars in her eyes. "Daddy, are you a real pilot? You're the best pilot in the world." Daniel knelt, hugging his daughter tightly. "I was, sweetie. Now I just need to be your dad. That's the most important job." Ilara stood behind them, her carefully maintained emotional defenses crumbling. Seeing the quiet tenderness of the powerful man, a man who chose fatherhood over fame, she couldn't hide her self-disgust anymore. She swallowed hard, approaching him as he stood up. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaking with humiliation, a sound no one in the company had ever heard. "I behaved horribly. I am profoundly sorry for what I said, for what I assumed." Daniel merely looked at her, his gaze soft but steady, seeing right through the CEO mask to the distress beneath. "We all make mistakes, Miss Voss. It's a hard world to see clearly in." His forgiveness was more crushing than any accusation, because it was delivered with absolute heartfelt humility, the humility of a man who needed nothing from her. The refusal. Ilara, her worldview irreversibly changed, rushed to make amends. "Daniel, I want to formally offer you a position. Effective immediately. Chief Technical Consultant. 4 times your current janitorial salary. Flexible hours. Work from home whenever you need. Just name your price and your terms." Daniel looked down at the ground, then back at the CEO, who had treated him as less than human only hours before. "Thank you, Ilara. Truly. But I have to decline." Ilara was stunned. "Why? This is an elite position. The money, the respect you deserve." Daniel's reply was gentle, private, and deeply sincere. "The money doesn't matter if it takes me away from the only person who truly needs me. My wife is gone. I left the Navy because I was tired of a high-risk life outside. Now I need a no-risk life. I need to be here for her every day at 3:30 p.m. The commander can't guarantee that. The janitor can." He paused, looking at her with gentle sadness. "I don't need your respect, Ilara. I need safety." Ilara, who had always defined respect through power and money, was left speechless. He had chosen quiet love and duty over the very things she worshipped. Daniel gently pulled his cleaning cart away, offering her a small final nod. He simply replied, "I'm content being Daniel, the janitor." Ilara was left alone, surrounded by her now humbled executives, realizing the massive human cost of her arrogance. The helipad incident was a seismic event that shook Voss Aerial to its core. Ilara Voss, the notorious Ice Queen CEO, underwent a stunning public metamorphosis. Her first action was radical, immediate, and institutional. Within 24 hours, she implemented a zero-tolerance policy on employee mockery, requiring all executives to attend a mandatory, respectful leadership seminar. She personally oversaw a 15% increase in wages and benefits for the entire maintenance division, calling it an adjustment for historical inequity. Employees watched, bewildered, as Ilara started spending time on the lower floors. She was seen eating lunch with the technical and cleaning crews, asking questions about their work, not to judge, but to genuinely understand. It was an odd, unprecedented display of humility, signaling a major cultural shift. Daniel continued his janitorial work, now surrounded by an atmosphere of silent, respectful awe. The mockery was gone entirely, replaced by respectful nods, apologies from his former bullies, and frequent, formal requests for technical consultation. The chief pilot approached him repeatedly, begging him to accept a flexible consulting role. But Daniel always refused, unwavering in his commitment to Lily's school schedule. His priority was his daughter, not the paycheck. Ilara's interest in Daniel and Lily soon moved beyond the professional scope. It became personal. She began making small, deliberate gestures that weren't about a job offer, but about building a relationship. One evening, she showed up at their small, comfortable apartment with a bag of educational toys and a gourmet coffee kit meticulously labeled for Daniel. She explained awkwardly, standing rigidly on the threshold. "Lily is extraordinary. She deserves the best things. I wanted to help if you'd let me." Daniel, observing her closely, saw the change was genuine. The sharp arrogance had dulled, replaced by clumsy, endearing sincerity. The CEO persona was slowly dissolving, revealing a lonely, deeply guarded woman underneath. One late afternoon, in the quiet solitude of the employee garage, Ilara found Daniel preparing to drive off. She confessed, her voice tight and genuine. "That day when I said, 'Fly the helicopter,' I was trying to look strong because I felt powerless against the technical failure. I wanted you to feel ashamed, but in the end, I was the only one who felt it." Daniel leaned against his old truck, his gaze gentle, looking her straight in the eye. "Don't be so hard on yourself, Ilara. The CEO mask you wear keeps everyone out, including yourself. We are all guilty of only looking at the labels we put on others to make our world simpler." Ilara looked at him, truly seeing him now. Not the janitor, not the commander, but the man, calm and kind. She realized Daniel was not only the most competent man she had ever met, but also the kindest and most grounded. He had taught her more about leadership, courage, and humanity in one moment of quiet skill than her entire competitive career. She found herself craving his presence, his calm, centered perspective, the antidote to her own manic ambition. "Daniel," she asked softly, the corporate facade finally gone, her voice pleading, "if I wanted to know the real person behind the uniform, the real Daniel, could I?" It wasn't a question about work or a job. It was a desperate plea for connection and mentorship in life. Daniel, seeing the raw vulnerability in her eyes, didn't answer with words. He offered a small, hopeful smile that signaled a cautious invitation. That weekend, Ilara took the boldest step yet. She invited Daniel and Lily to her apartment for dinner. It was not a business dinner. It was the start of something unexpectedly personal, an admission that the wall she had built around her isolated life had finally crumbled for the simple, extraordinary man she had mocked. The dinners at Ilara's penthouse began a quiet, steady revolution. Ilara, the aloof CEO, started dedicating her evenings to Daniel and Lily. She began tutoring Lily, her corporate demeanor melting into clumsy, endearing attempts at braiding hair, basic math, and reading fairy tales. Ilara's cold, luxurious apartment slowly warmed, the echoing marble halls now filled with Lily's clear, contagious laughter and the cozy aroma of simple, home-cooked meals prepared by Daniel. She found these meals more satisfying than any Michelin-starred fare. Daniel watched the subtle but profound shifts in Ilara. She stopped checking her phone every 2 minutes. She laughed more easily, and her eyes, usually rigid and judging, softened when she looked at Lily. Yet old habits died hard. One evening, she instinctively reached for her work laptop during dessert, her eyes instantly hardening into the CEO mask. Daniel gently placed his hand over hers. She flinched, then slowly, shamefully, withdrew her hand and closed the screen. One evening, after Lily was asleep, Ilara sat next to Daniel on the plush sofa. The silence between them no longer awkward, but comfortable. "You make me want to be a better person," she confessed, her voice almost inaudible, staring out at the city view. Daniel reached out and squeezed her hand lightly. "You were always a good person, Ilara. You just buried her under a mountain of ambition and fear. You were just too afraid to show who you really were." She laughed, a genuine, tearful sound he hadn't heard before, the sound of a burden finally lifted. He tucked Lily into bed, kissed her forehead, and then turned back to Ilara, their eye contact deeper and more committed than ever. "When you fixed the system that day," she admitted, running her finger over the sofa armrest, "I've never seen anything so beautiful. It wasn't just your skill, it was your integrity, your choice." Daniel gently took both her hands. "It wasn't about my skill, Ilara. I'm just a man doing a job, whether it's flying or mopping. It was because in that moment of crisis, you finally saw me with non-judgmental eyes. You saw the man beneath the label." He paused, his expression turning serious. "When my wife passed, I promised Lily and myself, no more high-risk, high-stress life. I need control over her environment. Being the janitor gives me that control, that time, and I won't give that up for anything less than safe and whole." Ilara leaned her head against his shoulder. "No longer the CEO, but a woman seeking stability. I understand. I've lived a high-risk, high-stress life for so long, I didn't know any other way to feel important." Suddenly, Lily's door creaked open. Lily, rubbing her eyes and clutching a stuffed animal, bolted out of the room, running straight to them. She climbed onto the sofa, wedging herself between them, taking both their hands. "Stay, Ilara. Stay with me and Daddy. We're a good team." Ilara let out a warm, joyful laugh, the sound echoing softly in the vast space. She looked at Daniel, her eyes asking the question that words couldn't form. Daniel looked at Ilara, then at his daughter, their small hands intertwined with his. The choice was clear and simple. The safety he craved was no longer about anonymity, but about connection. He answered for all three of them, his voice filled with hope and commitment. "If you want to, we can try to be that team, Ilara. We can build that safe, whole life together." Ilara nodded, the tears of happiness finally spilling over, her eyes alight with a rare, undeniable joy. The CEO had been shattered, and in her place was a woman ready for love. Final scene. Weeks later, the three of them stood together on the 58th floor helipad, the exact spot where the story began, with Mockery and fear. This time, Ilara's arm was linked tightly with Daniel's. Lily nestled safely between them. The CEO, who once looked down on everyone from this perch, now looked out at the city with a heart utterly changed. She was holding the hands of the two people who had taught her the true meaning of value, integrity, and family. The wind was still fierce, but they stood together, a small, strong unit against the world. Daniel said softly, "Thank you for finally seeing me." Ilara squeezed his hand, her smile genuine. "Thank you for teaching me how to look, Commander." If you believe stories about kindness, humility, and the unexpected heroes among us deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to my story channel, Stories.